Hello again and welcome to ManchTalk. My name's Tammy Simmons and I'm glad you're tuning in today. So, spring apparently finally is really here. Leaves are starting to bloom. That's always refreshing in the springtime. It was great to see so many people out at the Taco Challenge last Thursday, despite the fact that it was a rainy kind of day. Dan and I seem to have been downtown more often lately than normal for us. We went out Saturday on Cinco de Mayo and had a great lunch over at Lorena's Cantina on Elm Street. If you haven't been yet and you enjoyed Mexican food, I'll tell you that it was absolutely delicious. So it's nice to finally be outside and know that, it's not going to snow next week. In the news, if you haven't noticed, so today's Tuesday, so yesterday, Monday, there was a bear in a tree over near St. Mary's. St. Marie's Church over on the west side. Watched that live on WMUR. Thank you for having that. He was tranquilized and brought down safely, and they'll transport him up to the White Mountains. And who knows, maybe he'll wander way back, find his way back down towards Manchester. But it was very unusual to see another bear. I think there was one either last year or the year before, also on West Manchester. So we do live in New Hampshire. There is wildlife. Also in the news, into this morning's union leader, and this isn't the first we've heard of it, but it was reported again in the paper. Last night at the aldermanic meeting, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen voted to approve spending $1.5 million of your tax dollars to settle a potential lawsuit against the city of Manchester by a West High School student from 2015. There was a young girl, I think she was 14 or 15 years old, who was raped by a fellow student who was 17 at the time. And she is suing, or potentially was going to be suing, the city of Manchester because the argument was that the school didn't protect her. Prosecutors at the time said that the school officials were aware that the hallway at West was frequented by students looking to skip classes or smoke cigarettes or pot. So there was lapse there where, some in the school knew that this was a problem area, yet nobody seemed to do anything about it. And then this girl ended up being raped by a fellow student, which is terrible. And now the taxpayers of Manchester are going to be settling that potential lawsuit for $1.5 million. The board voted to use $200,000 of the district's anticipated surplus to fund a portion of a legal settlement, with the remainder of the $1.5 million funded by using money set aside for a $1.3 million debt service payment in June. So this begs to ask, how is it that if the school district has anticipated surplus of $200,000, which isn't huge considering their school budget, when we're talking about a school budget of what, $160 million, but they do have a surplus, yet for the next year they're still asking for more funds. They have a surplus, but they need more than even that. It doesn't make any sense. And then it also makes you wonder, if the money was being set aside for a $1.3 million debt service payment in June, are we just not paying that $1.3 million debt service payment, or how are we paying that? So things like this, it's easy to approve. It's not easy, I shouldn't say that. It appears to be easy to approve spending money when it's just lines on a paper and you're just going to shift the shells around and find another way to pay for it. So that's one thing that's going on. I also wanted to touch base about something that I talked about remotely last week. I don't know if you saw my show last week. It was a little haphazard. I'm desperately trying to learn how to tape outside of the studio, partially because it's so gorgeous, partially because I want to show people beautiful places. And sometimes there's just things going on that makes it difficult for either me to get into the studio at a specific time and be at something else that I want to be at. So last week I did talk about SB 193, which is the Senate bill that the House was voting on regarding education savings accounts. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to say it again. Education savings accounts would be funds set aside where the funding from the state adequacy money would follow a student that meets certain criteria rather than following the school district. So last week, SB 193, which started in the Senate. That's why it starts with SB versus HB, Senate Bill 193. It started in the Senate, and they passed it with their amendment. So they took the original language and they amended it, and they passed it. Then it goes across the hall to the House, and the House Education Committee worked on it, and they came up with their own set of amendment, and that passed the House 184 to 162. So, 18 votes, something like that. Yeah, 18 votes. Then it had to go over to the House Finance Committee, and where Representative Neil Kirk seemed bound and determined to have this bill meet its demise. He seemed, for somebody who's supposed to be a solid Republican, being anti-school choice doesn't really fit in with that. But regardless, Neil Kirk had made his committee made the recommendation of interim study, which means basically the bill would die. So that came to the House last week. There was an attempt to stop that motion, stop the interim study bill, motion, but that failed, 170 to 159. So we're talking about 11 vote difference. And then on Thursday morning, in the second day of House session last week, there was an attempt to move reconsideration, which, for those of you who want to learn a little bit about how the House works, when you pass a bill, so often somebody will move reconsideration. In order to move reconsideration, you have to have voted on the prevailing side. So if a bill passed, you had to have voted yes. If a bill failed, you had to have voted no. And generally, you make the motion for reconsider, not because you actually want to reconsider the bill, but because you want the body to vote no on reconsideration. That locks in that result. So in this case, it was a little bit different. It was actually a move to reconsider the bill. I'm sure had the Republicans not moved it, the Democrats would have moved reconsideration to put a definite end to it. But anyways, the reconsideration vote on Thursday failed 165 to 172, just 7 votes. Part of the problem is that a lot of people don't attend. I guess there were 38 Republicans missing or not voting on Thursday. So, maybe if more people came to the State House on session days, we might have different outcomes. So everybody thought, well, that's it. That's the end of the education savings account bill for this term. But later Thursday, the Senate, Thursday evening, they actually attached the language from the Senate version of SB 193 to House Bill 1636. Now, the reason the Senate can do that is their rules are different than the House. In the House, any amendments to bills have to be germane. They have to be of the same subject matter. The Senate has different rules. They can attach non-germane amendments to anything. So they're kind of they have much wider leeway to amend things. So Senator John Reagan from Deerfield, he attached Senate Bill 193 to House Bill 1636. So 1636 was originally a bill put forth by 3 Democrats, and it originally was to establish a committee to study teacher preparation and education programs. Along the way, the Senate had already amended it to add chartered public school use of unused school district facilities. And then now with John Reagan's amendment, they would add the implementation of education savings accounts. So you wonder, okay, well, what does all that mean? Well, now what happens when the House has one version of the bill and the Senate has a different version of the bill, meaning whichever body had it last made an amendment, the other body has to either agree to those changes or not agree to those changes, or they can still work on it. So there's 3 options. There's concur, which means body A agrees with body B. There is non-concur, which means they're just not going to agree and then the bill dies, or they non-concur and request a committee of conference. So because it was a Senate bill, last amended by the Senate, now it is up to the House to decide whether to agree, disagree, or request a committee of conference. This has gone back to the House Education Committee. That's the committee that it came out of the first time when it passed the full House. They have 3 options: concur, non-concur, or non-concur and request a committee of conference. This will be voted on Thursday this week. Today is the, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. The 10th will be Thursday. May 10th, the House will yet again vote on the education savings accounts. I would hope that the Education Committee will move to concur with the Senate. I think the version that came out of the Senate originally was the better of the versions put forth. I would hope that the House Education Committee, which seems to be supportive of education savings accounts, would concur with the Senate and then let the full body vote on it on Thursday, and hopefully enough Republicans show up to pass it. So if you live in a district and you think education school choice is a important topic, if you'd like to see money follow the student rather than follow the schools, you might want to encourage your state rep to make sure to get there and attend. Will say that most of the reps in Manchester do attend on a fairly regular basis, the Republican ones anyways. So we'll see how it goes on Thursday. So I thought I'd talk just a little bit about what education savings accounts do and don't do, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation out there. First, for those of you who don't know how education's funded, we have two taxes that you pay that go towards education. There is the statewide tax, which is, bear with me, I've got notes here. The statewide tax, which in Manchester last year was $2.32 per $1,000 in valuation, or about 1% of your tax bill. And, oh no, almost 10% of your tax bill, I'm sorry. And then there's the local school tax, and that varies. Obviously, Manchester pays different than Bedford pays, than Auburn pays. We all pay the same state school tax, but every municipality pays a different local school tax. So here in Manchester, the local school tax last year was $8.82, or 37.8% of your tax bill. The state tax was $2.32, or 9.9% of your tax bill, for a total of almost 48% of your tax bill just going towards education. So the money that education savings account deals with is only the state adequacy dollars. Now, I did some searching this morning because as much as I've been following this over the years, it does get kind of confusing unless it's something you talk about every day. So back when they made the Claremont rulings and the Supreme Court decided that cherish meant fund, I don't know where that came from, but when they said that the word cherish in our Constitution meant fund, that's where the statewide property tax came from, because the state is required to provide funding for an adequate education. So for fiscal years 2018-2019, that amount is $3,636.06. And that's per what they call ADM, which is average daily membership. So for every student this I thought was interesting because the word reside is in here. Adequacy aid is calculated using the average daily membership of the students who reside within a municipality. It doesn't say students who are enrolled in a municipality, students who reside in a municipality. So each student is one ADM. Now, when kindergarten students if it's half day, they're a half of an ADM. Homeschoolers who use academic courses in high school, they get 0.15 ADM per course, so on and so forth. So that's how the state calculates how many students a municipality has. Now, in addition to that $3,636, there's also funding for those lower income students. So if a kid is eligible for free or reduced lunch, not necessarily takes free or reduced lunch, but is eligible for it, the state will give that school district an additional $1,818, which is another half of the regular funding. Additionally, there's for special education students who have an IEP, there's an additional $1,956. English language learners, so those who are learning English, there's an additional $711, and this one absolutely kills me. For each third grade pupil whose achievement score on the state assessment for reading is below the proficient level, we give those school districts an additional $711 per student, which seems bizarre, because wouldn't we want, there's like a double-edged sword. You want the kids to be proficient in reading, but maybe not until fourth grade, because if they're not proficient in third grade, the schools can get an extra $711 from the state, which is, still us. But anyways, so that's the adequacy dollars. Then in addition to that, because when this was implemented in 2012, there's stabilization grants, because if, for instance, in Manchester, where maybe our funding would have dropped significantly, the state said, well, we're going to stabilize things, which was a great idea, I guess, at the start. But then what ended up happening is our students moved to Bedford, and we were still getting the funding from the state for them, and Bedford wasn't, because there was a cap on how fast a community could grow. It was crazy. Anyways, in 2019, the upcoming year, 88% of the decreased 2012 amount will still be awarded to the communities in the form of stabilization. It drops 4% every year over 25 years. Eventually it'll go away. So there's all sorts of money that Manchester gets from the state in the form of adequacy. So now the worst case scenario, I was thinking about this. So if you had a student who didn't speak English, was in the 3rd grade and wasn't proficient in reading, has an IEP, and is from a poorer family, so would be eligible to free and reduced lunch, theoretically, the school district could get over $8,800 from the state. But I doubt there's very many students that would meet all those criteria. So what does this mean for education savings account? Opponents would tell you that giving this adequacy dollars to the child to go to either a private school or be homeschooled or for tutoring or whatever is going to just simply decimate the public school system. Well, that's probably not going to happen. Actually, numbers show that that's not going to happen, because you have to remember, it's not just $3,600 that fund is what we spend on education. In Manchester, we spend over $11,000 per student. So there's still like $7,000 or $8,000 that I pay and you pay to the school district towards education, above and beyond what the state pays. And when that student leaves, they're going to take the $3,600, but that $7,000 or $8,000 that we pay for in the school tax, that's still going to be there. So we're actually going to be spending more per student than less. So I wanted to put some actual numbers to it. So I went out and I did a little research this morning, and Josiah Bartlett Center for Public Policy, which is run by Drew Klein, they did a whole report on the impacts that education savings accounts could have on various municipalities. And one of the things that they say, they show that enrollment declines projected by ESA opponents would actually leave districts with more than 98% of their operating budgets intact. This report also showed that public school enrollment from 2010 to 2015 was actually larger than what would potentially be a drop due to ESAs. So now the numbers that they're using to come up with these figures uses the averages of all state aid, including all these other factors, because one, they rather use higher numbers to show the worst case impact, because like I showed, $8,800 could be lost per student, but that's not really likely. So they're not doing this, they're not using conservative numbers, they're not just using the $3,600 number. And it was interesting. It says the average school district in New Hampshire would keep 99.7% of its operating budget if 1% of the students leave, and 98.7% if 5% of the students leave. So looking at Manchester specifically, if 1% of Manchester school students, 1%, all took this were eligible for the ESA and then left and went someplace else and took those funding with them. Right now, the operating expenses per pupil, based on 2015-2016 numbers, is $11,389. We have an average of 12,986 ADMs for that same time period. The total average aid per ADM is $4,499, so that would be that's $3,600 plus some funding. 1% of students in Manchester would be 130. If those 130 students left, 99.6% of our school budget would still be intact to educate only 99% of the students. So we would actually have more money in our school budget left, not less. Now, if 5% left, because that's what everybody's like, oh, they're all going to run, which if they're all going to leave the school, maybe we have to look at why they would all leave the school. That would be 650 students. If those 650 students left, we would maintain 98% of our overall school expenditure. 98% of the budget would remain intact for 95% of the students. I don't know how anyone in Manchester with a straight face can say that this ESA program would decimate Manchester schools. If anything, it would do just the opposite. It would take students away, leaving more money for the rest of the kids. So like I said, they'll be voting on that this Thursday. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I know I pay, Dan and I pay a lot of taxes. We pay over $8,000 a year in property taxes here in Manchester. We pay over $322 every single month towards the schools. I would like to see my $322 a month go to best educate every single student. And in some cases, that's going to mean not in the public school system. This is, not every student works the same, and not every student thrives the same way. And I just think we have to have more options for more kids so that we can make sure that we are adequately educating our youth. So that's all I've got about education. We'll see how that goes, and I'm sure I'll follow up with you next week. I did want to talk a little bit about some things coming up. I don't know if you're like me. I've got a little bit of a green thumb or a green foot, or just, I don't know. I like the garden. I love to be outdoors. I love flowers. I just love gardening. So I wanted to tell you about some things coming up in the next few weeks. First, this Friday, and I don't have a ton of information about this, so you're going to have to just wing it with me. This Friday, May 11th at 8 a.m., the Manchester West High School Greenhouse Club plant sale will take place. This is their third annual sale, and the proceeds will go to funding the Manchester West High School Greenhouse Club. They say some of the plants they'll be selling are flowering plants and vegetables. Again, that's this Friday, May 11th at 8 a.m., I don't really know much more about it. It's in my neighborhood, so I will try to go over there before I head into work on Friday. So that's this Friday. This Saturday, May 12th, I mentioned this last week, from 9 to noon, the Auburn Historical Associations and Friends of the Griffin Library will be having their second annual plant sale and quilt show. That takes place at 102 Hooksett Road in Auburn. Again, that's this Saturday, May 12th, from 9 to noon. You can get more information about that at auburnhistorical.org. Then next Thursday, the Manchester Garden Club will be holding their May meeting. Now, this is during the daytime. It's Thursday, May 17th at 12:30 p.m. at the Manchester City Library, which is located right there at 405 Pine Street. They're going to do a presentation on daylilies, and for those of you who want to get more involved in a garden club right here in Manchester, maybe it's worth taking time on your lunch hour or whatever to stop in and see that. Again, that's the Manchester Garden Club May meeting next Thursday, May 17th, 12:30 p.m. at the Manchester City Library. Next Saturday, the 19th, is my favorite plant sale of the year. The Bedford Garden Club will have their annual plant sale. It takes place at the Bedford Town Hall, located at 70 Bedford Center Road. That's the old Bedford Town Hall. Anyways, they have perennials, herbs, ground covers, some commercially grown annuals and perennials, decorative bricks, hanging basket raffle, and a gardener's thrift shop. That's new. It is without a doubt my favorite plant sale. I get so much stuff for my yard, and being that I have a whole new yard to fill with plants, I'm looking forward to going and getting a wide variety of stuff. So you'll see that runs from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So I will bet that I will be there by 9, if not earlier. You can get more information on that at bedfordgardenclubnh.org. I will make sure next week and the week after and upcoming weeks, I'll keep telling you about plant sales. I know there's one that comes up at the animal shelter. I believe that one's on June 1st or something like that. That's another really, really good plant sale that benefits a great organization. I did want to mention, again, I mentioned it last week, on Sunday, May 20th, the New Horizons Walk Against Hunger will take place. It kicks off, I believe, at noon at Veterans Park. It's a 5K walk run. The Manchester Republican Committee is walking in that, and if you'd like to support this effort by donating to our team so that we can help fight hunger here in our community. You can email me directly here at manchtalk@gmail.com, or you can go out to the Manchester GOP website at manchestergop.com and find a link there for how you can either join our walk team and walk with us, or donate to the Walk Against Hunger. It is a dog-friendly event, so Dan and I will be bringing Jenny, and I know State Senate candidate Carla Garrick's going to walk, so I'm sure she'll be bringing her dog as well. And it'll be a great time, a great way to get out into the community and take a nice walk and benefit a much-needed cause right here in our community. That's really all I have for this week. I'm looking forward to better weather. It's in the 70s, and it's great because it's nice and cool at night, but nice and sunny in the daytime. If you want to get out, take a walk on the bike path or go out on the path behind Nuts Pond or up around Livingston Park, there's lots of great places right here in our city. I know Dan and I went out to the Audubon Center on Sunday when it was raining. We brought umbrellas and we walked part of the path, and that was really, really gorgeous. So get out there, enjoy the great outdoors, and see some of the beautiful things that Manchester and its surrounding communities have to offer. I look forward to next week. Until then, have a great weekend. Bye.